Beneath Pennsylvania's quiet forests and ridges lie ancient secrets, stone chambers, lost symbols, and legends too strange to ignore. This is a journey into the forgotten past, where the land itself remembers, and some mysteries refuse to stay buried. Burial mounds of the Susquehannock. The river winds quietly now, but long ago it bore witness to something more than just canoes and trade. Along the banks of the Susquehanna River, in the rich soil of Pennsylvania's heartland, the land rises in strange, deliberate humps, burial mounds. These aren't incidental hills shaped by time and erosion. They are too symmetrical, too precise, too intentional, and they've been whispering to those who listen. When the first European settlers arrived, they noticed them immediately. Mounds rising from the ground, in places where no ordinary land feature should be. They asked the local Susquehannock people about them, who had built them, and why. The Susquehannocks, known for their towering height and formidable presence, answered carefully. Some said the mounds were sacred, others said they marked a deeper mystery, one even their ancestors hadn't built, but had inherited. The Susquehannocks themselves were imposing figures, described in colonial journals as tall, broad-shouldered warriors with unusual armor and complex tattoos. Some accounts, including one from Captain John Smith, claimed they stood nearly a head taller than most Europeans, but even they seemed to revere these mounds as remnants of something older, something nearly forgotten. As settlers spread westward, the mounds became the subject of intense curiosity. Farmers dug into them, out of both necessity and fascination, and what they found wasn't always expected. Skeletal remains, yes, but some far larger than average. Skulls were oversized, jawbones immense, and in certain cases, burial chambers were lined with stone coffins or peculiar carvings. There were tales of bones measuring over 7 feet long, of tools and artifacts made from copper and mica, and of symbols etched directly into the bones. These discoveries weren't always documented officially. In fact, many were quietly suppressed or lost. Some blamed the Smithsonian Institution, accusing it of collecting the strange artifacts only to lock them away in vaults, never to be seen again. Whether that's true or not remains a matter of debate, but the gaps in the historical record are hard to ignore. One such site, near Safe Harbor, Pennsylvania, reportedly revealed a massive burial chamber in the early 1900s. Local accounts describe a dome-like mound that, when excavated, contained an array of bodies laid out with mathematical precision. The largest skeleton, locals claimed, was over 8 feet tall. Surrounding it were clay effigies, metal tools, and even a crystal-like orb clutched in its hand. Not long after, the site was bought by a company and leveled. Whatever was inside was either hauled away or buried again, this time under asphalt and concrete. Another case came from Tioga, where a farmer unearthed a chamber beneath his fields while digging a well. Inside were stone walls arranged like a beehive, and what he claimed were human remains unlike any he had ever seen. He brought some of the artifacts to a local tavern to display them, but one night they vanished. So did the chamber. Later surveys of the land revealed no evidence it had ever existed. But perhaps the strangest aspect of these mounds lies in their alignment. Many are positioned in ways that track the stars. Archaeological maps show burial mounds lining up with solstice points, equinox paths, and even the movements of certain constellations. For a supposedly primitive culture, this kind of celestial precision is hard to explain. In Juniata County, a mound once stood atop a hill that gave a clear view of the sunrise at both solstice points. Before it was flattened in the 20th century, a local pastor claimed to have entered a stone chamber beneath it. He described obsidian blades, a set of discs carved with spirals and stars, and an overwhelming feeling of static energy, like the air before a lightning strike. Days later, government officials arrived and cordoned off the site. No explanation was ever given. To this day, whispers persist around certain mounds, especially those that remain intact. Locals report flickering lights, unusual electromagnetic disturbances, and sometimes the sense of being watched. One man who camped near a mound in the early 1980s claimed he saw glowing figures walking its perimeter just before dawn. Another, a construction foreman near the Conestoga River, said that after bulldozing a mound for a road project, 3 of his workers were injured in freak accidents. A fire later destroyed their records. The folklore is just as eerie. Elders in some nearby towns speak of sky people buried in the mounds, tall beings with eyes that glowed blue in the firelight. Others say the mounds are not tombs at all, but markers, nodes in a forgotten grid of energy or power, like acupuncture points in the earth. There are stories of people who tried to rob the mounds, only to fall ill or vanish entirely. Today, most of these ancient formations are gone, plowed under, built over, forgotten. A few are marked with signs, vaguely acknowledging their presence without diving into the deeper legends. But those who've grown up near them, those who felt that strange hum in the ground, know better. What were the Susquehannock mounds really for? Were they simply graves? Or were they more gateways, observatories, warnings? Why do so many reports describe oversized skeletons, strange symbols, and unnatural phenomena? Whatever their purpose, one thing is clear: the land remembers. The mounds may be quiet now, but the questions they raise are louder than ever. And if you find yourself walking near the Susquehanna at dusk, and the air turns heavy, and the birds go silent, don't look too long at those soft rising humps in the ground. Something beneath them might be looking back. The Monoliths of Bald Eagle Mountain. Bald Eagle Mountain casts a long shadow over central Pennsylvania. It stretches along the spine of the Appalachian Ridges, its flanks blanketed in thick forest and ancient rock. To the casual hiker, it's a beautiful range, rugged, peaceful, scenic. But beneath the tranquility lies something else. Because on certain peaks, scattered in deliberate patterns, are massive stone monoliths. Some upright, some tilted, all seemingly misplaced. Locals have long speculated about these rocks. Are they random geological formations? Or were they deliberately placed by ancient hands? Hikers and surveyors have cataloged the oddity for over a century. Isolated vertical stones, some weighing multiple tons, perched in places where no glacier or landslide could reasonably have deposited them. Many of these stones are balanced with uncanny precision. Some are stacked. Others are aligned in rows or circles. On top of that, they often face specific celestial markers: sunrise points, equinox positions, or star alignments. It's hard to believe it's just coincidence. One such formation lies near the summit of Bald Eagle Mountain's eastern ridge, a massive upright slab of stone, flat-faced, narrow, and roughly 10 feet tall, stands isolated at the edge of a cliff. Around it are 4 smaller stones, forming a rough semicircle, almost like a keyhole pointing to the horizon. Every spring and fall, during the equinox, the rising sun passes directly through the notch between the monolith and a second standing stone 100 feet away. The alignment is too perfect to dismiss. Locals call this place the Druid's Gate. They say it hums just before dawn during equinox week, when the wind moves just right. Some have claimed that electronic devices stop working in its vicinity, or that animals refuse to go near it. But the strangest stories come from those who've camped overnight there. One man described dreaming of stone circles and fire rituals. Another woke up with geometric patterns drawn in the frost around his sleeping bag. There's no official explanation for the site. Geologists say the stones are ancient sandstone, possibly broken off from the cliff face, but they can't explain the symmetry, the placement, or the astronomical alignment. And this isn't the only site like it. Further west, near Port Matilda, lies another strange arrangement: a series of long, flat stones laid end-to-end across a ridge like a path in the wilderness. The so-called stone line stretches for nearly half a mile, disappearing into forest and reappearing near a creek bed. The stones are roughly the same size and width. Natural erosion could never replicate that kind of uniformity. Local folklore claims the path was once used in moonlit rituals by skywatchers, who charted the heavens and left warnings embedded in stone. In nearby valleys, farmers have unearthed smaller stone markers while clearing fields, each one carved with concentric circles or spiral grooves. No one knows what they mean. Some have compared them to ancient Celtic ogham or even early Norse runes, but there's no evidence those cultures ever came to Pennsylvania. Still, the symbols persist, repeated again and again across multiple counties. Were these a language, a code, or just meaningless scratches? It's hard to know when there's no one left to ask. There's another theory, one that's rarely voiced publicly, but surfaces often in quiet conversations with local historians. The monoliths weren't meant to be seen from the ground at all. They were meant to be read from above. It sounds absurd, until you realize that many of the formations, when mapped, form geometric patterns only visible from the air: circles, triangles, and long, deliberate lines. On old aerial photos, especially those taken before development and deforestation, you can trace some of these patterns running across miles, like a lost star map etched into the land itself. And then there are the stones that don't just align with celestial bodies, they mimic them. Near Beech Creek, there's a circle of upright stones that mirrors the shape and spacing of the Pleiades star cluster. Another, farther south, near Mill Hall, features 2 parallel rows of stones with a central marker at the far end, an exact match for the Orion constellation when viewed from a specific point at dawn in early winter. Were these ancient calendars? Temples? Beacons? Who would have built them, and why? The Susquehannock left no records of erecting such stones, and their oral traditions only reference the mountains as places of power and caution. Some legends tell of sleeping giants beneath the hills, and of stone watchers that guard certain paths through the wilderness. There's also the persistent tale of the Stonecaller, an old folk legend that describes a figure, half man, half rock, who awakens when the stars return to their proper place. He is said to guard the gate between sky and root, a phrase that has never been fully explained but is often linked to the monoliths of Bald Eagle. Some researchers believe the formations may predate all known human activity in the area, possibly the work of a pre-native civilization now completely lost to time. Others believe the stones are natural, shaped and placed by long-vanished ice flows and landslides. But even those who argue for natural causes often admit the patterns, the alignments, the repetition, it all feels deliberate. The mystery deepens when you hear accounts of magnetic anomalies near some of the stones, compass needles spinning wildly, GPS glitches, sudden drops in temperature, and in at least 2 cases, hikers reporting temporary amnesia, losing hours they can't account for after walking through stone-lined paths. These aren't just stories passed around campfires. They're detailed, eerily similar accounts gathered years apart from people who had no contact with one another. The stone formations seem to generate something, an effect, a presence, a memory, something we don't yet understand. Today, many of these sites are hidden in the woods, forgotten by all but the curious and the local. No signs mark their presence. You'll find no official trails leading to them. Some believe that's intentional, that the stones weren't meant to be public, but protected, guarded from the casual eye, or perhaps guarded against. So if you find yourself hiking through Bald Eagle Mountain and you see a lone standing stone in a clearing, don't assume it's random. Step carefully. Look around. You may be standing inside an ancient map, one written in stone and shadow, meant for a sky no longer ours. Petroglyphs of the Allegheny River. The river speaks in a language older than words, etched not in sound but in stone. Along the winding banks of the Allegheny River, where the water carves its way through forested hills and forgotten towns, ancient carvings tell a story no one can fully translate. These are the petroglyphs, strange, sometimes chilling images, chiseled into rock surfaces, often in places accessible only by boat or careful climbing. And they are everywhere, if you know where to look. On flat sandstone boulders near the water's edge, dozens of symbols stretch across the stone like an unread book. Some are simple, spirals, handprints, and crude humanoid figures, but others are baffling. Intricate star patterns, odd-looking animals with elongated limbs, abstract geometric grids, and beings with round heads and radiating lines, some eerily resembling what modern viewers might call helmeted figures. The most famous cluster of these carvings can be found near Parker's Landing. Known to locals as the Indian God Rocks, the site hosts over 50 visible petroglyphs. Though many have eroded with time, enough remain to leave a clear impression. These were not idle doodles. Some figures appear to hold tools or staves. Others seem to float or emerge from spirals, forms often interpreted as portals or doorways by researchers. Then there are the starbursts and ladder shapes, repeated across multiple sites, and always pointing in specific directions. Indigenous oral traditions say these stones are messages, warnings, guides, even sacred contracts with the land. But no one alive today can fully decode them. The native peoples who may have carved them, possibly ancestors of the Lenape or Shawnee, left few written records, and some scholars believe the carvings are much older. The petroglyphs near Franklin, at a site called Rainbow Rocks, include a recurring motif, an inverted triangle surrounded by 7 dots. Archaeologists have dismissed it as decorative, but local elders say it represents the Watchers from the 7 Fires, a phrase tied to a much older legend involving visitors who came from the sky, teach, warn, and vanish. Whether the 7 dots represent stars or something else is unknown, but the symbol appears across petroglyphs more than 100 miles apart. In certain locations, the carvings are found high above river level, places that would have been nearly inaccessible without ladders or ropes. Why carve symbols where no one could easily see them, unless they were meant for something or someone else to see? There are also curious consistencies across multiple river systems. Along the Allegheny, the Monongahela, and even into parts of the Ohio River Basin, the same figures appear again and again. Humanoids with outstretched arms, concentric circles with central dots, and zigzag lines that seem to depict movement or vibration. One stone near Brady's Bend shows a figure standing between 2 swirling vortexes, arms raised, head encircled by rays. Beneath it is a triangular shape pointing downward. Some believe it's a stylized map, others say it's a message no longer meant for us. And while many of these carvings are in remote spots, Some are oddly placed near modern infrastructure. In a hidden hollow just beneath a now-defunct railroad bridge, locals discovered a set of glyphs in the 1970s that appeared overnight. They matched no known indigenous style. A team of amateur researchers documented them, noting that the rock had no signs of weathering or age. Theories ranged from hoax to psychic impression to spontaneous appearance. No official archaeologist investigated. The glyphs were quietly scrubbed clean by vandals a year later. But the mystery isn't just in the symbols, it's in the feeling. Many who visited these sites report an odd sensation. Time feels different. A strange silence overtakes the riverbank, even when birds are chirping. Some people speak of sudden headaches, bursts of emotion, or a sense of being watched. One man, a kayaker who stumbled upon a glyph-covered stone during low tide, described feeling an overwhelming sense of grief and guilt, so powerful he broke down in tears and couldn't explain why. There's also an unsettling pattern that appears in certain locations, the missing petroglyphs. Stones known to have carvings in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s have since been found scrubbed clean or entirely removed. In some cases, even photographic records have gone missing. While erosion and vandalism explain some of it, the sheer number of vanished glyphs raises questions. Who's removing these ancient messages, and why? Not all believe they were human messages to begin with. One fringe theory, gaining quiet popularity, suggests the glyphs were never meant for human interpretation, that they're part of a code left by beings not native to this place, perhaps not even to this world. The Star People stories, often dismissed by academics, speak of visitors who came in glowing boats that sailed not on water, but on light. Some indigenous myths claim the symbols were instructions passed down from these beings, recorded by early tribes but never fully understood. In one recorded Lenape tale, the river was a sacred path, a mirror of the sky, and the stones were places where the sky people touched the skin of the earth. The carvings, it says, were their fingerprints, a poetic way of saying they left a trace. Could it be literal? Even skeptics admit that the carvings deserve more study. The problem is, so many are located on private land, ignored by official surveys, or slowly vanishing due to erosion and river rise. A whole language may be slipping away, one chisel stroke at a time. But not all is lost. A small group of modern researchers, part archaeologist, part mystic, part adventurer, are quietly mapping what they can. They've begun comparing satellite views, celestial overlays, and geological data, looking for a bigger picture. Some believe the petroglyphs aren't just messages, but part of a greater system, nodes on a forgotten grid, linked by energy lines that once pulsed with purpose. Whether these carvings are messages from the past or echoes from something not quite human, one truth remains. Someone went to great effort to leave them. Someone who knew how to read the stars. Someone who knew these rivers would carry not just water, but memory. So the next time you're near the Allegheny's edge, look closely at the rocks. What seems like a smudge or a crack might be more. It might be a whisper from 1,000 years ago or longer. A story told in stone, still waiting for someone who speaks its language. The Lost Tribes of the Octoraro Creek. Follow the bends of Octoraro Creek in southeastern Pennsylvania, and you'll find a land veiled in mist, steeped in secrecy. Its name may not carry the weight of other famed mysteries, but among locals, the region holds a legacy far stranger than it first appears. Here, among the rolling hills and dense woods, lies the story of a people who seem to have vanished, not simply displaced or erased by war or time, but swallowed by something far older. These were the so-called Lost Tribes of Octoraro, guardians of sacred knowledge and keepers of something never fully understood. Unlike the well-documented Susquehannock or Lenape, this group left behind few traces. Early colonial records mention them only briefly and often cryptically referred to as the Stone Keepers, or those who speak to the ground. These weren't just poetic descriptions. The earliest trappers and settlers described encountering native people who lived not in villages, but in hidden enclaves, stone huts with slanted roofs, always built partially into the earth. They communicated through gestures more than words and vanished silently when approached. One explorer in the late 1600s reported finding what he described as a sunken village near the mouth of the creek, a cluster of small stone dwellings built around a perfectly circular stone well. Inside the well was a spiral staircase leading down into darkness. When he attempted to descend, a local guide pulled him back, warning that the watchers wake below. The village was abandoned. The next spring, a flood supposedly washed the entire structure away. It has never been rediscovered. But whispers about the Octoraro people persisted. They were said to be master stoneworkers, able to shape boulders without tools. A few strange stone artifacts out of place with known regional designs have been found buried in the area. One such find, now missing, was a tablet carved with a star map and a series of symbols resembling modern binary code. A farmer who unearthed it while digging a foundation showed it to a local antiquarian. Days later, the artifact disappeared from his barn. A suspicious fire followed. Locals blamed arson. Others blamed the watchers. Then there's the sound. For generations, residents along the creek have reported hearing a deep, resonant hum emanating from beneath the ground. It's not constant, but it's regular, always near dawn or just before a heavy rain. One man, a retired geologist, set up equipment to capture it and determined the sound was coming from beneath a dense patch of forest near a bend in the creek. He described it as a standing frequency, as if the earth is vibrating from some internal device. He later retracted his findings and refused to speak of it again. The people tied to this area, the Lost Tribe, as they've come to be called, are rarely mentioned in official histories. And when they are, it's only in passing, a strange footnote. But dig into the journals of colonial surveyors, and you begin to find patterns, references to invisible guides, the hidden stone roads, and the ones who never age. One particularly unsettling account comes from 1723, written by a Quaker missionary. He claims to have encountered a woman in the woods near Octoraro, who spoke perfect English, yet wore clothing made entirely of woven reeds and fur. She warned him not to awaken what sleeps in the ground, and spoke of a time when the sky will crack and the old blood will rise. He assumed she was mad, but when he turned to leave, she vanished, leaving no tracks in the soft earth. The stream itself plays a central role in the mystery. Octoraro Creek behaves oddly compared to neighboring waterways. It floods when others remain calm. Fish avoid certain stretches of it, and those who swim in its more remote pools sometimes emerge with odd burns or rashes, despite the water testing clean. A local legend says the creek is alive, a guardian or jailer of whatever sleeps beneath. Another says it's a wound in the earth that never healed, leaking time and memory. Then there are the stone circles, nearly a dozen of them, scattered across the Octoraro wilderness. Often mistaken for old property markers or colonial fire pits, they bear a haunting similarity to the ancient stone circles of Europe. Each one is composed of smooth river stones, placed with uniform spacing. And at the center of each, buried beneath layers of soil and moss, is a single obsidian shard, too precise, too perfect to be natural. Some say the stones pulse at night. Others claim that if you sleep within a circle, you dream in languages you don't speak. In the 1950s, a group of amateur archaeologists attempted to map all the circles. Their notes suggested that when connected, the circles formed a near-perfect sigil, a shape resembling a double spiral with a central axis. Before they could publish their findings, their lead researcher died under mysterious circumstances. His notes vanished from the local historical society's archive. Another persistent tale involves a narrow cave entrance near the southern tip of the creek. Locals call it the Whisper Hole. It's barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, and it descends rapidly into the earth. Inside, visitors report hearing voices, not whispers exactly, but something like chanting carried on wind that doesn't move the air. Those who enter too deep have reported strange phenomena, time loss, nausea, and in one case, emerging from the cave with an unfamiliar item in their pack, a carved stone pendant shaped like an eye. As of today, no academic team has seriously excavated the region. It remains rural, sleepy, and deliberately overlooked. Some claim there's a reason for that the mystery isn't just inconvenient, it's protected. The descendants of those early settlers, the ones who still live near the creek, tend to go quiet when asked about the legends. Some say the lost tribe still walks the woods, untouched by time. Others believe they returned to wherever they came from. A few think they never left, they just sank deeper into the ground, becoming one with the stone they worshipped. Maybe it's all myth, maybe the lost tribe never existed, but something moved through the Octoraro wilderness. Something that knew the stars, that carved in stone, and that left behind traces not easily explained. A people forgotten by history, but not by the land. And when the fog rolls in heavy, and the creek murmurs just a little louder than usual, it feels as though the forest itself remembers. Underground chambers of Tioga County. Tioga County is a quiet place. Tucked in Pennsylvania's northern reaches, it's all winding roads, thick woods, and long silences broken only by the rustle of trees and the occasional call of a hawk. But beneath its soil, deep in its forgotten ridges, are whispers of something stranger. Here, in the wooded hills near Pine Creek Gorge, and along the flanks of the Allegheny Plateau, are hidden structures not easily explained. Not caves, not natural voids, stone chambers, constructed spaces. Underground rooms built with architectural precision, and no one knows who made them, when, or why. Locals call them the Tyogga Vaults. They aren't marked on maps. Most were found by accident, discovered by hunters, hikers, or farmers. One of the earliest written accounts comes from 1889, when a surveyor reported stumbling upon a stone room beneath a moss-covered hill. He described a rectangular space about 12 feet by 8, lined with fitted stones, dry-laid without mortar, but interlocked with uncanny precision. No visible entrance led to the chamber. It had to be accessed by crawling through a natural-looking crack in a hillside. Inside, he found nothing but dust and silence. But the room felt wrong, he wrote, as if something had been waiting and left just before I arrived. That was the beginning. In the decades that followed, more chambers were discovered across Tioga County, each one different in shape, but eerily similar in construction. Some are square, others are circular with domed ceilings, made of overlapping stone slabs. A few feature niches in the walls, like primitive shelving. One contains a carved pedestal at its center. No tools, no bones, no artifacts, just the structure itself and always that strange hum in the air. A stillness too deep to be natural. Official archaeologists largely dismiss them as root cellars or colonial ice houses, but that explanation unravels fast. Many of these chambers are buried deep in dense, uninhabited forest, far from any known settlement. Some are built into cliffsides, others into remote hills, where no colonial farming or storage would have occurred. And then, there's the craftsmanship. Stones fitted so tightly that light won't pass between them. No chisel marks, no mortar, just perfect placement. In the 1970s, a college student researching folklore claimed to have mapped 6 of these structures across Tioga County. When he connected them, he found they formed a near-perfect hexagon, each point equidistant from the next. That information never made it into a publication. The student dropped out mid-semester, left town, and never spoke of it again. Locals tell stories about the chambers, though not always directly. There's talk of old places where the ground breathes, and houses that were never made for people. Some believe the chambers are ancient observatories, built to align with solstice sunrises or lunar cycles. Others whisper about underground passageways, long collapsed, that once connected the vaults across the region like a forgotten transit system. One of the most chilling tales comes from 1932, when 2 brothers, teenagers at the time, discovered a chamber while tracking a deer. The entrance was hidden behind a tumble of boulders, and the air inside was cold and dry. They claimed the room was hexagonal, with 6 walls converging inward, and a circular hole in the ceiling that opened straight to the sky. One of the boys climbed up to peer out the top and saw nothing but a swirling blackness, even though it was noon and the sun was high. Spooked, they left. One of them never returned to the woods again. A handful of researchers have tried to study the vaults with modern tools. Ground-penetrating radar scans conducted near one site in the early 2000s revealed an entire complex beneath the hillside, multiple rooms arranged in a honeycomb pattern, with narrow corridors connecting them. Before excavation could begin, the land was abruptly sold to a private owner. Access was restricted. Whatever was down there remains untouched, and yet, the chambers continue to whisper their secrets. One theory, passed between independent researchers, is that the vaults are memory chambers, places designed to store something non-physical, not objects but ideas, or energy. Perhaps a kind of ancient archive that doesn't rely on words or parchment. Some have even suggested that when you sit quietly inside one, long enough, you don't hear your own thoughts, you hear someone else's. There are people, those sensitive to such things, who've sat inside the chambers and claim to experience visions, flickers of cities made of stone and glass, the sound of deep drumming beneath the earth, a voice speaking in a language they don't know but somehow understand. One man spent the night in a chamber and emerged convinced that the structures aren't empty, they're waiting, charged, preserved. And then there's the compasses. Time and again, explorers have brought compasses into the vaults, only to watch the needles spin erratically. Magnetic interference in the middle of nowhere. One chamber, known only to a handful of people and nicknamed the Eye, sits at the center of a small clearing where no vegetation grows. It's shaped like an oval, with a dome ceiling and a flat, perfectly polished black stone in the center of the floor. It reflects no light. Cameras malfunction inside the room. Batteries drain. Those who've entered and stood in the middle say the air grows thick like standing underwater. Speculation runs wild. Are these places ancient power stations? Burial sites for beings we no longer remember? Astronomical engines? Or something darker? Traps, prisons, sealed rooms holding forces better left untouched? We don't know, because every time someone tries to investigate too deeply, the trail ends, maps disappear, funding vanishes. Or worse, people change their minds. One promising archaeologist who once advocated for deeper study of Tioga's vaults eventually denounced them entirely, calling the structures the result of imaginative folklore. But those who knew her said she was different afterward, quieter, withdrawn, always watching the woods behind her home. There are reports, hard to confirm but persistent, of a seventh chamber, one that's never been entered, buried beneath a hill whose name no one will share. The vault is said to hum with a low vibration detectable even through the ground. It's said the entrance is sealed with a capstone engraved with a spiral and 3 notches. Some believe this final chamber is the key, the nexus. Others say opening it would be a mistake. What we do know is this: someone built them, with care, with skill, with a purpose that's now lost. And they're still there, beneath the forest floor, untouched by time, protected by silence. If you find one, you'll know. The ground will feel colder, the trees will stand still, and for a moment you'll feel like you're not alone. Because maybe you're not. The Forbidden Cave of Panther Valley. The Panther Valley rests in the shadow of the Blue Mountains, where the ridges roll like frozen waves, and the forests feel older than the wind. It's a quiet place, rural and rugged, dotted with coal country remnants and long-forgotten footpaths. But among those who've lived in its wooded folds for generations, there's one story that continues to ripple through time. A story about a place no one wants to talk about too loudly. They call it the Forbidden Cave. It's not marked on any official map. Ask around in Laheyton or Susquehannock, and you might get a shrug or a wary glance. But a few old-timers, if you ask the right way, will nod slowly and point toward a hollow near the base of a rock face. Don't go looking for it, they'll say. Whatever's down there, it ain't for us. The cave has many names. The Black Hole, the Breathing Mouth, the Gate, but most just call it what it is: forbidden. The entrance is narrow, barely visible under a ledge of slate and overgrown moss. But those who found it describe a sharp drop into darkness. The air inside isn't just cool, it's wrong. Stale, dry, and heavy, like an old attic filled with dust no one remembers stirring. And deeper in, the cave expands, not into a natural cavern, but a deliberate space. Walls too smooth, corners too sharp, a place shaped, not eroded. The first known account of the cave dates back to 1831, in the journal of a trapper named Elias K. Warner. He wrote of discovering a narrow door in the hill while tracking a wounded deer. He entered, lantern in hand, and followed the path downward until he reached a chamber unlike any cave I have seen. Stonework done by hand, and walls that glowed faintly blue, as if dusted with stars. He claimed to see symbols carved into the rock, spirals and eyes and strange figures, and in the center of the chamber, a stone altar with something resting atop it. Something he could not describe, only that it pulled at the eyes and the mind. He never returned to the cave. His journal ends abruptly, a few entries later, with only one final line beneath the account: "I was not meant to find it." Since then, stories have accumulated slowly, like soot on an old lantern. In the 1920s, a group of teens reportedly found the cave while hiking. One of them, a boy named Dale Horner, disappeared. His friends returned alone, shaking and speechless. Days later, Dale walked out of the forest, silent, pale, and altered. He never spoke again. He died in a mental hospital in the 1970s. His records were sealed. Others who've entered the cave have reported strange phenomena: a humming sound with no source, lights that flicker behind closed eyes, and sudden feelings of vertigo and time distortion. Watches stop, batteries drain, voices echo strangely, repeating things never said. A local woman who ventured inside in the 1980s claimed to lose 3 hours. She emerged with her boots worn through at the soles, and a set of 3 puncture marks on the back of her neck. Her medical records describe the wounds as unexplained but surgical in precision. But what truly unsettles those who know about the cave are the objects. Artifacts, if you can call them that, have been found near the entrance over the years. Pieces of obsidian shaped like keys, coins with no markings, and once, a small tablet made of an unknown metal, etched with a grid of tiny raised squares. A geologist who examined the metal tablet said it did not match any known alloy on Earth. The tablet vanished from his lab before further testing could be done. Local legends tie the cave to older myths, tales of beings who lived beneath the mountains, not human, not animal. They were said to be watchers, caretakers, or jailers, depending on who tells the story. One tale, passed down by the Lenape, speaks of a mouth in the earth where the sky once fell. It was to be guarded forever. If opened, the songs of the stone will call back the others. Even stranger are the stories from those who have dreamed of the cave before ever seeing it. More than a few locals, upon being shown sketches of the cave's entrance, go pale. "I've seen that," they say, in a dream. Years ago, they describe descending stone steps, seeing a chamber lit with soft blue light, and a presence, something just out of sight, watching, always watching. In 2003, a research team from a small private institute attempted to survey the site using sonar and ground-penetrating radar. They claimed to detect vast open spaces beneath the cave, a network of tunnels and chambers extending for miles. Before they could return to excavate, the land was suddenly acquired by an anonymous buyer. Fencing was erected, access denied. The cave, once known only through whispers, disappeared from view again. Some believe the cave was once a temple, built by a pre-human race with knowledge far beyond ours. Others think it's a natural rift, a weak point between dimensions. A few are convinced it's a prison, something built to contain a force we were never meant to encounter. And then there's the cave's behavior. It seems to resist being found. Maps shift, GPS fails, hikers circle for hours, only to pass the same tree again and again. And when they finally do find the entrance, the forest grows quiet, as if it's watching, waiting, weighing the intent of those who arrive. There are a few who claim to have seen what lies deeper, beyond the first chamber. They speak of an immense corridor lined with tall, smooth pillars. The pillars hum when touched. Carvings on the wall shift when stared at too long. At the far end is a doorway, sealed by a stone slab covered in interlocking spirals. No one has opened it, at least, not yet. The cave is more than just stone and shadow. It is an anomaly, a wound, a doorway, a monument. It doesn't behave like a natural place because it isn't one. And those who stumble across it often change, subtly, quietly, as if the cave takes something in return for letting you walk out again. Most now avoid the place, but a few keep watch. Silent men who visit the edge of the forest and leave small offerings, stones stacked just so, feathers bound with twine, copper coins pressed into tree bark. They don't say why, they just nod and walk away. And if you ever do find it, if you walk the quiet woods of Panther Valley and see the black opening beneath the stone, think carefully before stepping inside, because some doors open both ways, and not everything that comes through is meant to leave. Echoes beneath the Keystone. The sun sets slowly over the Delaware Water Gap, pouring gold across the ridgelines and catching the glassy surfaces of forgotten streams. It's a beautiful place, wild, rich with trails and hidden waterfalls. But in the highlands just beyond the popular paths, where the trees grow thicker and the air feels stiller, there is a rumor, a final mystery as old as the stones themselves. They call it the Sleeping Stone Giant. Unlike the vaults, or the petroglyphs, or the Forbidden Cave, this isn't a structure or a chamber. It's a shape, colossal, unbroken, lying across the land, as if the very mountain had once drawn breath and then went still. If you stand in just the right spot near Kittatinny Ridge and look out across the valley, the land forms a perfect figure, a human body, reclining, face to the sky, arms at its sides, legs together. Hills form the torso, a cliff defines the jaw. Trees grow along the ridgeline like hair, and the proportions are exact. It could be dismissed as pareidolia, just another case of the human brain seeing faces and figures where none exist. But hikers and naturalists have noted something strange about the formation for over 100 years. The symmetry is too precise, the curves too intentional, and more than that, it seems to shift. Photographs taken decades apart show changes in the silhouette, slight shifts in the chin, the slope of the chest, even the position of the arms. Satellite imagery has confirmed this in recent years. The changes are real, but they happen so slowly, so subtly. No one notices until the comparison is side by side. Some say it's just erosion, but others aren't so sure. Local Lenape stories refer to this landform not as a sleeping giant, but as a guardian, a being placed here long ago to keep something in or something out. In their oral traditions, the land was shaped by the skywalkers, celestial architects, who built not with tools, but with thought and time. The giant was one of their own, sealed in stone, resting until the stars returned to a certain configuration. Interestingly, these stories speak of the ground beneath the giant as hollow stone wombs beneath the surface, where light sings and memory walks. Several independent ground scans conducted quietly by university teams in the 1990s found voids beneath the ridgeline, massive ones, cavities the size of buildings, but no drillings or digs were permitted. The area lies within protected federal land, and the National Park Service has enforced access restrictions since those findings surfaced. But the local stories persist and grow stranger. Campers report odd sensations while staying near the ridge. Dreams that don't feel like dreams. A man who awoke screaming after seeing a silver face rising from the valley. A woman who described hearing a deep heartbeat in the ground that synced with her own until she fainted. Compasses go haywire. Clocks stop. Animals avoid the ridgeline's highest point, moving in wide arcs around it. There's also a curious lack of vegetation across certain parts of the giant's face. Trees won't grow. Moss spreads in perfect lines. Geologists call it coincidence, but those who've tried to plant in those areas say something in the soil refuses life. One gardener claimed to have dug just below the surface and found a layer of smooth black stone, cold to the touch, unbreakable, humming softly. Theories abound. Some say the sleeping stone giant is a remnant of ancient Earth energies, a convergence point where geomagnetic fields once crossed, leaving behind a petrified conduit of unknown power. Others believe it's a biological entity, a living being now encased in stone, preserved in some suspended animation. A few suggest it's not a being at all, but a vessel, a craft, one that landed or was buried long ago, its true shape disguised by time and terrain. And then there are the lights, faint glows, mostly seen at night, small bluish orbs drifting just above the treetops. Sometimes they pulse, sometimes they vanish in a blink. A park ranger once chased one, thinking it was a drone or hiker's light, only to watch it drop vertically into the earth and disappear without a sound. He refused to talk about it afterward. In 2011, a local historian and amateur cartographer overlaid a celestial star chart onto the landscape of the water gap. The result was uncanny. The sleeping giant's position aligned perfectly with the Orion constellation, his face beneath Betelgeuse, his belt matching the twin valleys carved by the Delaware River, and his feet stretching toward the position of Sirius. It wasn't perfect, but it was close enough to raise questions. Was this formation designed to mimic Orion, or was it meant to call something down? An old Lenape chant, recorded by missionaries in the 1700s, translates roughly to, "When the hunter lays still and the wolf forgets the moon, the mountain will breathe again and the sky will open." No one knows what it meant, but in light of the giant's shifting shape, some believe it's a prophecy. More recently, hikers have reported tremors in the area, small, localized quakes that don't show up on seismic maps. One group camping near the ridge in 2022 claimed the ground rose slightly beneath their tents during the night. Not much, just enough to lift their gear an inch or two. They thought it was a prank until they realized the slope around them had changed. Trees had shifted position. A new crack appeared in a nearby boulder that hadn't been there the day before. The idea that the land could move on its own, that something under the soil might still be alive, is disturbing. But in Pennsylvania, such notions have quietly trailed behind every legend we've explored. The Susquehannock mounds that hum, the stone monoliths aligned to stars, the petroglyphs whispering of sky beings, the Tioga Vaults that defy time, the cave that takes more than it gives. Each one points to the same eerie idea. Something else was here. Something that built, watched, waited, and maybe still does. The sleeping stone giant, maybe the final piece, or just another chapter. But whatever it is, structure, symbol, or sentinel, it stirs something ancient in those who see it. Because deep down, we recognize its shape. It's not just a mountain, it's a memory, and perhaps a warning.